Welcome in, everybody, to a Football Friday edition of Birds 365 here on JAKIB Sports. Another week in the books, and we are 6 days out from the NFL draft. Everybody is patiently waiting. I'm your host, Zander Krause. That's my co-host, John McMullen, the number one Eagles beat reporter in town, and we are Birds 365 all through the offseason, all through the year. We will keep you covered every morning, 8 to 10 a.m. for the Philadelphia Eagles. Johnny Mac, how you doing in this Football Friday, brother?
Doing well. Happy Good Friday for all the people who are, into that. And if you're not, we're here for you. But either way, we're here for you. Birds 365. So a lot of people taking it easy today, gearing up for the big draft. For me, it's WrestleMania weekend, so that's a bigger deal. I got to get through that. But
Holy Week too, as you mentioned, obviously Good Friday. So Easter's a big weekend. So a lot of stuff going on this weekend, John.
Exactly. So hopefully you stick with us for one more morning, and then we get in the draft week and we're off and running again.
Yep, no doubt about it. Good stuff with draft week. A lot of stuff on the TV this weekend for this weekend. NBA playoffs are kicking off. The NHL playoffs are kicking off. Anything you're going to tune into, Johnny Mac? You going to watch some NBA playoffs?
No, WrestleMania. I just said
just WrestleMania. That's just it this weekend.
It's
How about later in the NBA playoffs? Will you watch any of the?
Yeah, I'll later. Yeah, later I will.
And they get better, obviously, each series as it dwindles down. But going to be interesting to see. I haven't followed the NBA enough to have an educated take on who could be a real contender to win this year. But Boston's a safe bet. And LeBron and Luka are another probably safe bet because I don't know. It seems like that team is getting hot at the right time. We will see what all happens with that. I want to welcome and thank everybody for being here this morning. We got a great show planned for you guys. We'll take some chats in hour number 2. Your guys' questions on the NFL draft, your guys' questions on the offseason, the moves, anything that's out there on the Philadelphia Eagles, maybe even Jordan Davis. We haven't heard much about that. That's upcoming. I think you'll learn more about what they're going to do there based on what they do in the NFL draft. But we will talk about that. Good to see my guy, Joe Whipp. Joe Whipp was golfing yesterday, and he won our giveaway, John. And Joe's been waiting to win the giveaway. So, Joe, good to see you back in here. I'll coordinate with you about that.
What'd he win?
He won a Super Bowl shirt, and that's it. A nice Eagles Super Bowl shirt.
All right. Super Bowl champions. Gotta take pride in that. We got a bunch
of the Super Bowl merch. Yep, we got a bunch of the Super Bowl merch. So we're going to give away a couple more things today. For those who are interested in that, stick around after the show, and I will do some giveaways for you guys as well because I had a run yesterday. So we got some extra giveaways to do today. Appreciate all you guys being here. John, what I want to do for everybody today is go through that top 30 list, and I want to tell the people these are your round 1 targets or high round 2 targets. These are your day 2 targets, round 2, round 3. These are your day 3 targets because the visits are completed, obviously, on who the names that we know. I don't know how many it is. I never added these up, but there's clusters of players. I mean, there's edge rushers, there's offensive tackles and offensive linemen. There are a couple defensive tackles, and then there are a bunch of secondary players. I think there's 4 corners and 4 safeties. So a bunch of that, and then 2 running backs. So it's kind of clustered out. They're almost tipping their hand in what they want to do. But I do want to rank them and categorize them by what round they are projected to go so that the fans have an idea. Hey, I'm watching the draft. It's round 3. Who did the Eagles talk to that could be available in round 3? I'd like the people to know that because it is a lot of names for people that aren't locked in on the NFL draft. So let's start, John, with round 1 and run through that list of names. Before we start, I want to read off the list of names just based on what we have. So we have Iowa State offensive tackle Jalen Travis, NC State offensive tackle Anthony Belton, Purdue offensive tackle Marcus Mbow, Oregon offensive tackle Josh Connerly, Kentucky cornerback Maxwell Hairston, SMU edge rusher Elijah Roberts, Boston College edge Donovan Izaraku, Miami edge Tyler Barron, Texas running back Jaden Blue, one of 2 running backs that were in, William and Mary offensive tackle Charles Grant, Ohio State guard Donovan Jackson, UCLA edge Oluwafemi Oladejo. We call him Femi. I'll stick with that.
Femi.
Yeah, Femi Oladejo. Georgia guard Dylan Fairchild. Texas A&M defensive tackle Shamar Turner. Kansas State cornerback Jacob Parrish. Texas A&M edge Nick Scorton, Ole Miss cornerback Trey Amos, South Carolina defensive tackle TJ Sanders, Penn State safety Jalen Reed, USC cornerback Jalen Smith, Ohio State defensive tackle Tyleek Williams, Penn State linebacker Kobe King, Georgia safety Malachi Starks. That'll excite some people. West Virginia offensive tackle Wyatt Millum, Syracuse running back LaKin Allen, Navy safety Raywan Lane III, and Minnesota cornerback Justin Wally. So there is your list of names that we have reported on top 30 visits. Johnny Mac, let's start with the round one, brother, of what options or maybe targeted trade up or even maybe a couple spots back to trade back. A couple of the names that stick out or a couple of names on this list that would fit into that equation.
Well, I did this exercise on SI, so everybody can check it out. SI.com/NFL/Eagles. I call it my Eagles top 30 visit tiers. The last edition 3.0. Who knows? There might be one more of other names trickle out, but
right.
And that's basically what I do. So, tier 1, for instance, is the first round pick, which is number 32 or a targeted trade up. So, who belongs in that position if you have to stay put or you have to go up a few spots? And I don't think the Eagles would be going up more than 5 spots. So say 27-ish, somewhere in that range. And I think 3 people fit that definition of the guys they looked at. And that's Josh Connerly, the Oregon offensive tackle. Donovan Ezeraku, the Boston College edge rusher, and Malachi Starks, as you mentioned, which is probably the name that would excite people the most. I think those are the 3 players that belong in that sort of category. And then you have tier 2, which is the trade down guys. So to me, I want to get value and move a little bit down from 32. And there's a whole group in there. The 2 corners, Ole Miss is Trey Amos, Maxwell Hairston of Kentucky, Donovan Jackson, who I think might be the best fit for the Eagles in this draft, just for a day one perspective.
Yeah, he's a plug and play guy instantly.
Yeah.
Yep.
TJ Sanders, defensive tackle from South Carolina, Nick Scorton, who I also like a lot, but I want to get value. Like, I don't want to sit there and take him at 32 or certainly trade up. So, sometimes you have to. But those are the guys that should be in the equation, whether it's 32, targeted trade up, targeted trade down. Those are the names that I think are in that equation. And obviously, there's other guys on the Eagles board that they're probably so confident in, they didn't need to look at them. They didn't need to bring them in. So by no means are those the only names available, but of the guys we do know that came in, those are the players I think you should be looking at as potential first picks for the Eagles, wherever that comes off.
And so there's 8 names for you guys on the potential first pick. We may or may not get a pick even on day one. So we teased this 6 days from the NFL draft. Yesterday it was 7 days from the NFL draft. We might not even get a pick on day one if the Eagles decide to trade back. So I think we all hope they take a pick on Thursday, but honestly, let's just hope that they do what's the best move for the Birds and maximize the draft. But it will stink if we go Thursday night and we don't even get an Eagles pick. Maybe they'll announce something for the Birds on that night. John, of those 8 players, who's your favorite for the Birds? Who do you think fits this well? Now, I know you mentioned what's his name, Johnson as a
Jackson.
As a day one starter. I think Malachi falls into that same boat of if you draft him, Sidney Brown, go back to the bench. I think he's going to be your starter safety day one. A couple of the picks there that you think fit the Eagles the best or that you like for the Birds.
Yeah, I like Jackson. As I said, I think he'd be a plug and play guy, right guard, day one starter. I like Scorton for a couple reasons. One, he adds some much needed size to the edge. Plus, it's a need position. Yeah, I'm with you. With Malachi Starks from a talent standpoint, but when I look at the top three guys I mentioned, which are Connerly, Ezaraku, Starks, they'll all be good fits. But the question is, how much do you have to give up? I think, if you ask me who just the best player the Eagles have brought in, I would say it's Ezaraku. But, I don't know if I hesitate to think that he's going to be there at 32. Not that it's possible, not impossible. He's undersized. He doesn't have the kind of length that you typically want from an edge rusher. So there's a possibility teams look at him a little bit differently and say, well, there's some limitations there from that perspective. But, he's so productive and on the college level, I got to believe somebody's going to take a shot at a valuable position around the league. And then he's also undersized. So, again, I've been talking about it for a while. Then you have him and Nolan Smith and Jalen Hunt and Azeez Ojulari. What do they all have in common? They're all undersized for the position. And that's why I like Scorton as the fit a little bit better, even though his ceiling isn't quite as high, more versatile, can kick him inside. With Starks, and people will say, well, Quinyon and Cooper did it as young defensive backs, but it's a really complicated system, and it's different for the safeties. Like, they have to know more than the corners, and they have to communicate more.
Right.
So I hesitate, I think if they get a player like that, people will be saying that. Well, Quinyon and Cooper hit the ground running and assume, and I think safety is a much different position, much more responsibility. So I think there might be more of a ramp up period there.
I don't know. Well, I agree with you that there's going to be a sense of people think that it will just work out perfectly because of Quinyon and Cooper. There's no doubt about that. But just from this player, I mean, John started 39 straight games at Georgia, started early in his career. Like, I do think he's a super high football IQ guy, and that's actually what makes him great. Like Emanwari, for example, is a little more raw, but he's got this crazy athleticism, so people are enamored by him. I think Malachi is actually the opposite, where he's a polished, much more ready to play guy, maybe with not as much athleticism or upside on that stuff. So I think Starks really has a good chance to start, and it doesn't have much to do with Quinyon, but I do understand what you're saying.
Well, I think he would have a very good chance to start. I'm just worried about the performance of it and people jumping on to the thought that he's a disappointment because there's some busted coverages, and you know how this town is. So I'm a little, the Eagles will say you can't be concerned about that. And they're right. But I do think even with all the experience at the college level, he's probably more ready for somebody like Emanwara, but I don't think either would be ready to handle this system. And, when we talked about one of the reasons they like Reed Blankenship so much, and one of the many reasons Slay got in trouble was saying he's the leader, he's the guy, even though Vic said it. And CJ got a little bit upset about that. It's not easy to play that defense. And safety's different than corner. And corner was rare. I mean, I say that about corners. It's the same thing. If for some reason Hairston's here or Amos is here, you're going to have that immediate comparison. It's not fair, number one, but number two, it's an easier position from a communication standpoint. Not that it's easy, but it's far easier than safety, where you're making sure everybody on the back seven is lined up, and you have to communicate with the linebackers as well as the corners and your fellow safety. So
it reminds me of how you talk about coaches, where it's like it's a bigger job than people think. It's not just about playing football at that position. There's a lot more other things.
Yeah, it's a little bit, a little bit. The middle linebacker is usually the quarterback of the defense, but probably if you went down the league from a traditional standpoint, you'd probably lean because so few linebackers play. It's still mostly linebacker. You probably got 10 to 15 guys who are the leaders of their particular defense playing safety. That's how much the game has changed.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Good stuff there, Johnny Mac, on the players there. John, the one thing I'll say about this list of names, and we got 8 names here of guys who are, I think we hit the nail on the head in terms of who would be taken potentially with their first overall pick. Doesn't exclude all the people they didn't bring in, but does it tell anything about the players they didn't bring in? Like, we have talked a lot about Walter Nolan. We've talked a lot about James Pierce. We've talked a lot about a bunch of players that maybe could slip a little bit, maybe won't, but could slip. Obviously, a bunch of these players are like mocked at 10 or 30, depending on where, who you read, but none of them came in. No Walter, no James. Does that mean the Eagles don't like them? Does that mean they think they're not going to be there? What does that tell us about those players? Have we been getting excited at the potential of many of these guys for a whole lot of nothing, or is it still a good possibility they land them?
Yeah, it's still, in the case of somebody like Walter Nolan, it might be as simple as like the Eagles already made their decision. If he's there, they're going to take him, that type of thing.
So it could be the opposite.
Like, it could be
could be the Rams approach. I don't need anything. I just, if the player's there, I'll take them.
If you believe in, and they certainly believe in Dom, Howie mentioned him again, if they believe in their, and you might, there's the subterfuge comes into it. Because a lot of teams are concerned about some off the field stuff with Walter Nolan. So, they want to play into those things just like they did with Jalen Carter. And maybe they've already made the decision and said, we're strong enough to handle that. Let's get them. So I wouldn't rule out players because they weren't on top 30 visits. I see a lot of, I'm disappointed they didn't bring this guy in. These things are about information gathering. If you already have all the information you need, why do you have to gather? You're not
going to waste the visit just to say hi to a player,
Yeah. So you're trying to figure out on guys you may still have questions about for whatever reason. Maybe you missed them at their pro day, maybe whatever. There's only a certain amount of time you have. But the Eagles' recent history, and since, they've gone on this little run, is they draft a lot of guys they bring in for top 30 visits. But not everyone. So there will be people they draft that were not in here for top 30 visits. No question about that. I mean, so it's not some be all end all type of thing.
No, yeah, I agree for sure. And then the couple players I do think if they do slip, that's where I think that targeted trade up conversation, as we discussed, could come into play. Like Ezeraku, Starks, Connerly, if they really like Connerly. So it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing on that. John, the one thing I was thinking yesterday, Howie mentioned in his pre-draft presser how aggressive he likes to be, in his nature to be aggressive. All right. The whole NFL seems like they're zigging right now. Everybody wants out of the first round. I want to trade back. I want to trade back. You want to trade back. Is Howie going to zag and say, give me my guy. I'm trading up to 26, 27, and I'm getting my guy, Malachi Starks, or somebody like that? I think I could see it, man. I know we talked about it here on the show, but, I was just thinking about that and then coupling it with Howie's comment of, I'm aggressive by nature. I like to be aggressive. I could see him going and getting his guy in a draft where a lot of people want to fall back.
Yeah, I mean, he is, and that's been one of his strengths, aggressiveness. He's not risk averse is a term they always use. Jeffrey always uses. And it's served them well over the years. And he does often bring up, like, you don't want to go along with the crowd. You don't want to be. That's how you turn into a 500 team. You can't be 500 now because they're playing 17 games like a bunch of idiots. But back in the days when you're
18 soon, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. But back in the days when you could be 8-8, that's what groupthink gets you. 8-8. And Andrew Berry, when he left here, put Howie's quote on on his whiteboard in his office, and basically paraphrasing was, if you want to win a Super Bowl, you got to do something that could get you fired.
Right.
Talking about those risks and the cost benefit of them. So yeah, I mean he but to me it's about who's that player. I don't think it's anybody they brought in. I don't think they're going to dive into the pool and saying, "Oh, this is my guy." This is the two guys that might fit that category are Nolan, because that's probably a top 15 level talent that's going to fall a little bit,
Right.
and Derek Harmon at the same position, the Oregon kid at defensive tackle that people have. You know, he's to me a top 15 talent, but for whatever reason,
the hype train hasn't been as big on him so far this year, but he's a damn good player if you watch his tape.
But if I look at those top 30 visits, that player doesn't exist from an upside standpoint to take that kind of risk. And that's my problem with this draft. This draft is not great. So the point is, if you want to talk about the more liberal people saying there's 15 guys, well, I think Nolan and Harmon are one of those 15 guys. I don't think anybody they brought in is one of those 15 guys that are. And then you go from, say, 15 to 50, and everybody's could have jumbled up. So that's to me, that's a bad decision to go up and get one of those guys. But I don't know who that player would be for the Eagles. That's just a guess. I mean, they have an obvious need at defensive tackle. And those are two guys that are have a much bigger ceiling than where they're projected to go. And it's about stuff that doesn't involve football.
Good stuff there, Johnny Mac. John, let's move into tier 3, brother. So that was tier 1 and tier 2 that we gave you potential first picks for the Eagles. Just to recap it real quick, Josh Connerly, Donovan Ezeraku, Malachi Starks were tier 1, potential targeted trade up guys. Tier 2, Trey Amos, Maxwell Hairston, Nick Scorton, Donovan Jackson, and TJ Sanders. So that was your tier 1 and tier 2 guys. Now moving into tier 3, Johnny Mac, maybe that pick 64 or that later second round pick. I don't know if a couple of these guys are maybe even round 3 picks that maybe you drop back from 64 or you trade up in round 3, because day 2, if I'm not mistaken, is round 2 and 3, right? So we'll have 2 picks slotted for day 2 as it stands right now.
Yeah. Yes, they are. But
so the end of each round is, again, not that exciting.
Well, there's not quite the end of the third round, but that's because of compensatory picks. But they have the last natural pick, so to speak, of the third round. So it is 64 and 96 to start. You know, from my tier perspective, I did it as 64 or targeted trade up as tier 3. And those are the guys that you hope kind of falls. And they're probably not going to be there. But I can't justify taking them earlier. Right. So you kind of have to cross your fingers and say, all right, somebody doesn't like this kid. And to me, it's Anthony Belton, who's, he's the closest thing to Mekhi Becton.
Yeah, that's what I see too. Yep.
He's a natural tackle, but he's massive. You move him inside, and maybe have that heir apparent to Lane Johnson down the road as well. Now, again, I don't think he's going to be there at 60. I don't think any of these players are going to be there at 64. So it's probably going to have to be more of a trade up. But if one of them starts to slip, it might be interesting. And
it's a little easier to trade up in this round too, right?
Yeah.
Like compared to round 1, obviously. Like you could package a couple of those 5s maybe and probably move up if needed.
Yeah, and again, only if they start slipping. You're not going to go way up.
Yeah, right.
And some of these players may go way before. Like Belton, there's some talk. I've seen some that say the ceiling is so high, somebody might jump on him at the end of the first round. But I can't do that. Charles Grant, the William and Mary offensive tackle, very similar. Tremendous athlete, really, really high ceiling, but he played at William and Mary. I mean, the ceiling is so high, one of these teams might jump on him early, but for the Eagles, I can't see it. Same thing with Femi. You mentioned Femi Oladejo. He's got a massive ceiling, so I can see somebody, but the Eagles already have a raw pass rushing prospect that's pretty good. And Jalix Hunt. You want another one?
Right.
He was an off-ball linebacker. They switched him to edge, and all of a sudden, everybody's super interested. I think the Eagles already have that guy. So unless he balls, I'm not thinking about him until that spot. And then Tyleek Williams from Ohio State, and that tells you a lot about Jordan Davis. That is a 2-down run defender. So if they draft a kid like that, and again, he might go well before 64, but if they draft a kid like that, that tells you, all right, this is Jordan Davis's last year in Philadelphia.
That's trouble for Jordan Davis if they take Tyleek Williams.
Yeah. So that is my tier 3, which is 64 if guys start to slip or that targeted trade up. Then you have tier 4, which is 96 in the 3rd round, or a trade up in round 4. They don't have a 4th round pick. So they would have to do something to get, if one of these guys slips into day 3. But it would be, for me, it would be Dylan Fairchild, who's interior player for Georgia.
Offensive lineman, yep.
Yeah, in theory, he's a natural guard, but Jeff Stoutland, if he gets him, he'll work him at all 3 positions.
He's got the wrestling background, right?
He's got it. Yeah, he's got a wrestling background.
What does that mean? Like he did like wrestling in high school or something like
Yeah. And
okay.
there's a lot of success with those guys. That's why
absolutely
teams bring it up. Wyatt Millam, the offensive tackle from West Virginia, but he's projected to move inside because he's got shorter arms. So one of those things. Marcus Embo from Purdue, same thing. Tackle at Purdue, projected to move inside. He doesn't strike me as an Eagles player at all, because he's more of an athlete than a mauler. And you can say, well, what about Kelsey? Well, Kelsey's a center. That's a little bit different. But if you notice at guard, they want Brandon Brooks. They want Mekhi Becton. They want
Landon Dickerson.
Yeah. They want maulers. And last year, I think, only proved to them they're doing it the right way. So he doesn't strike me as a fit. And then Jacob Parrish, who's you're going to see a lot of this too. Outside corner in college, who's projected to play inside in the slot. And the Eagles need a backup for Cooper DeJean. One of the underrated losses from a depth standpoint is Devontae Maddox. I know fans didn't like him at the end, but he's a backup nickel. He's a backup dime, not backup. He was the dime player. He's a backup safety. So he played 4 different positions as a backup. And Parrish is sort of that slot guy. I think he's a no man's land player for the Eagles. I think he's going to go. You can't take a slot player when you have Cooper DeJean in the 2nd round again. You want a backup. So to me, if he slips, and he probably won't slip, so I think he's kind of a no man's land player. And then Jalen Reed, the Penn State safety, is in that category. Again, versatility, that's a big thing with some of these defensive backs they brought in. Can play big nickel, played
Have
safety.
to be able to do that. Yep.
Yeah. So he's in that category. Elijah Roberts, the edge rusher, is in that category. And Shamar Turner, the defensive tackle. Those are all the guys, to me, that are day 3 or a trade up in the day 4 options. The top of day 4, 4th round, because they're not going to be here. For those who don't know, the Eagles only have 4 picks right now on day 3, and they're all in the 5th round.
Right.
And they're all jumbled up. I think it's 161, 164, 165, 168. They don't have a 4th round pick. To get those types of players, they'd have to move up into the 4th round. So that is that's that tier, sort of end of third round, top of fourth round, maybe a little bit trade up.
There you go. Which of those players, John, do you like the most for the Eagles? I know you mentioned Mbo. Makes a lot of sense what you said. Not a mauler, kind of a an athletic type of player. Probably doesn't fit. The Parrish conversation is interesting. If you draft him and you want him to play slot, what does that mean for Cooper DeJean? Does it foreshadow that they do want to get Cooper DeJean outside? I think that conversation is still lingering, especially when you see the contracts come down this summer.
Yeah,
Cooper's agent's calling. Hey, man, I know Vic said he likes you in the slot, but that one dude made 100 million. The other guy made 40. We might want to try and get outside. So that conversation's interesting. If you get a guy like Jacob Parrish, Jalen Reed, the safety is an interesting one, and then obviously. Now this was tier 3, but Tyleik Williams was interesting. Oladejo, Grant, and Belton. I love Belton, man. It's funny. Belton is just like Becton, and their names are different by one letter. So it's Belton and Becton. There you go. So, but I do like Anthony Belton. John, which of these names do you like as fits for the Eagles the most?
Well, in that second grouping, I like them all from a talent perspective. Those are guys to me that are kind of pie in the sky because none of them are going to be there at 64.
You're talking about tier 3? You're talking about like
Belton, I'm talking about Belton.
Williams.
Yeah, that tier 3,
gotcha.
Belton, Grant, Oladejo, and Williams.
Gotcha.
I don't think any are going to be there at 64. I can't take them early with that first pick, wherever that first pick goes. And as I said, they're not going to be there at 64. So a bunch of no man's land players, but if one of them
have to trade up from 64 without altering your first pick, really, basically.
Yeah, which is difficult. And again, you're talking about raw players. In the case of Grant, you talk about the level of competition. In the case of Oladejo, lack of experience, very Jalix Hunt-ish. Didn't play, played at a high level college in UCLA, but from the standpoint of just being a raw prospect, just turned to the edge position from being an all-ball linebacker. So you have some size issues as well, which we've talked about. And even Belton, while I make that comparison, look, he's played as offensive tackle. So, right away, you have to pick Jeff Stoutland's mind and say, can this guy play guard? I just like some of the similarities to Becton from the standpoint of if you're playing linebacker, you almost have to choose. You almost have to guess on the gap because they're so big and they're so powerful. They block out the sun. And all of a sudden, if you dip inside, there goes Saquon outside. Or if you go outside, there he cuts it back. So I like some of that ability. And then Williams, after for what the Eagles are going through with Jordan Davis, who's who's better than Williams, but he's been a 2-down player. How high do you want to take a 2-down player to get a little bit worse? I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Well, in theory, you would save on the contract coming up.
Well, yeah, you're restarting the contract
right.
clock. So that part of it makes some sense. But from the standpoint of 13 million, like I think you can get through 2026 with Jordan Davis and say, guess what? It may seem like a lot. You see the contracts, that's half of what Milton Williams got. It's nothing.
It's not that much.
No. So I'm thinking of it as I got 2 years with that guy, minimum. And if he does develop further and can play more on third down, great. If he doesn't, I got 2 years with him. That's how I would look at it. And by the time, and Williams would probably need 2 years to get up to speed to be where Davis was 2 years ago. So it just doesn't make sense to me. But, we'll see. And plus, he's not going to be there at 64. And I'm sure as hell not taking him as a 2-down player with my first pick, wherever that pick is.
No, that's not even an option. I don't think it would be. Maybe if they wanted to go up to 60 or 58 or 56 or somewhere in that range and grab them. But yeah, I mean.
Yeah. So And then when you talk about the tier 4 guys, which is 96, or you trade up to round 4, that a lot of that depends on like what you got earlier. Like, did you get an offensive
Exactly.
lineman?
Right. Like, yeah.
If you didn't get an offensive lineman, then all of a sudden they start to get invested. Did you get an offensive lineman, but you didn't get the defensive lineman? Then Shamar Turner and Elijah Roberts become more of a part of the equation. So to me, but from the standpoint of who fits the Eagles well, like I said, I don't think Embo fits the Eagles. I don't think Parrish fits the Eagles.
What didn't you like about Parrish for the Eagles? Sorry, I didn't.
Well, he's going to be a nickel corner, and if Cooper's playing in the nickel, at least short term. Now, to your point, if they want to revisit that conversation because of the business aspect, yeah, then I'll reopen the conversation. But they don't want to seem to do that yet. They might have to do that down the road. And are you really going to, spend that kind of value on a backup player that's projected to be a backup player? I don't like that thought process. And I think Turner would offer more value if you haven't gotten the defensive tackle. I think Roberts has some interesting versatility. He can play inside, outside, so he can give you sort of a Brandon Graham, not as a player. Please don't think I'm comparing them as a player, but some of that inside, outside versatility if you need it.
I think Dick likes that versatility too, so it's definitely worth mentioning at this point.
And Jalen Reed as well has that kind of versatility. Played safety at Penn State when there was an injury. Before that, he's sort of a big nickel hero type player. So he's got some versatility. But a lot to me depends on, like, if they don't get the offensive lineman, then Millam and Fairchild are involved. And if they didn't get the defensive lineman, and Roberts and Turner are involved. So that will depend on who they get earlier in the draft.
Yeah, no, good. Well stated. We'll see what ends up happening there. John, moving into the final tier. These are your later picks. All right. John mentioned you got 4 round 5 picks. Okay. I don't anticipate, they're all in the 160s. It's possible Howie doesn't make one pick in the 160s. He could move these things to shake and bake all over the place, up, down, backwards, sideways, you name it. Howie will do it. But these are the players that are in that tier 5 category. Johnny Mack, you want to start it up?
Yeah, I got Tyler Barron, who's the edge from Miami.
Yep.
Jaden Blues, a running back from Texas. Kobe King, linebacker from Penn State. LaKent Allen, running back from Syracuse, who's from Millville, New Jersey, for the local people. Did I mention King? I think so. Penn State. Jalen Smith, another nickel potential guy from Southern Cal. Jalen Travis, the big lengthy tackle. And Justin Wally, the last guy that we know of from Minnesota, another slot guy. So to me, I like the thought of finding the backup slot here. And I like you need backup linebackers. You lost Oren Burks. We know Nakobe Dean, difficult rehab. I'm okay, with Trotter starting for a couple games at the start of the season, but you need depth. You need backup linebackers, and Ben Van Sumeren is going to play fullback now. So, Kobe King is interesting, more of a 2-down linebacker, not very good in coverage, bigger, so he offers you that. So guys like him and Jalen Smith and Justin Wally, I think it's a perfect position for them. And then the running back, if you can find, like, Allen, to me is the perfect Kenny Gainwell replacement. It's the best receiving back in college football, way ahead as a pass protector for normal rookie running backs like Jaden Blue. Jaden Blue he's another guy. I'm like, what? Jaden Blue?
Yeah, right.
Like, he's unbelievably fast, explosive, but he fumbles all the time. He can't pass protect. I'm like, What are we doing here?
Yeah. LaKen Allen, though, I like that you like him because, he's a Millville, New Jersey guy. Played at Syracuse, played with Kyle McCord, who's another guy that we've talked about, obviously the St. Joe's Prep kid who transferred over there and had a crazy good season. That's interesting. LaKen Allen, maybe he's a guy who could, could come home. Millville's not Philly, but it's close. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think he's very Kenny Gainwell-ish.
Yeah,
almost a template.
And he can block a little bit, right? I mean, we need a running back that can block.
Yeah, exactly. And Kenny, he's probably Kenny turned into pretty good by the time he
wasn't
last
bad.
year. But he wasn't great early. I would say Allen's ahead of the curve early from where Kenny was. And not that they're going to use him a lot, just like Kenny, but if you throw the ball his way, he's going to catch it. And yeah, I like him as a fit if you're trying to get another backup running back. And Barron is he's got NFL size, but he's not the most explosive pass rusher. So to me, he's a great backup type player. And if you don't get something earlier, he's pretty interesting. And then I think it's as I said, it's a perfect spot to find the out slot backup,
right?
Whether that's Jalen Smith or Justin Wally or somebody like that. And both of those guys have versatility. That's, Wally was a 4-year starter, played outside, but he's got to move inside. Smith played safety before he turned into an outside corner. He's played inside corner. So, yeah, you could see, and by the way, some of those names, I think the top 30 visits are even more important for sort of day 3 guys. So Allen, Barron, Blue, King, Smith.
Because it's more likely you can get them because you can shake and bake a lot easier in those rounds versus round 1. I mean, it's hard to get a guy you want.
Yeah. Justin Wally. Well, one or two of those guys is probably going to be an Eagle. Jalen Travis is the one guy I don't think there's a chance because when they brought him in very early, he was one of the earliest guys they brought in.
Yeah, that's right. And then they signed a bunch of dudes.
Yeah, and they signed Kendall Lamb and they signed Matt Pryor. So I'm not sure they need a tall swing tackle option anymore. But if you want to get younger and you like him, even he's a possibility. But he's probably the one that you say isn't a fit.
There you go. There's the breakdown, everybody, of the top 30 visits for the Eagles. A lot of these guys end up in Eagles green. So keep your name or keep your eyes on these names. Like, remember, as John pointed out at the start of the segment, these are not the only options. Okay, there is a whole draft of people, but these are the guys that the Eagles brought in, visited, talked to, and clearly have some level of interest in. Or maybe they just wanted to gain information, but this is what we know, and this is how we broke it out. I will run it by you guys real quick, and then we'll take a commercial break. When we come back, I got some good topics to discuss. I'll get the 2 super chats. I see you guys on the super chat, so we'll get them. We appreciate you. And in hour number 2 as well, I'll take some comments from the chat for John McMullen on the NFL draft coming up 6 days from now and 7 days from that day 2, which could be more important for the Philadelphia Eagles. So we will see what happens there. This is the rundown one more time, everybody, for the tiers that we just laid out to you. And I'll read it back to you right now. Tier 1, first round, number 32, or a potential targeted trade up. You have Oregon offensive tackle Josh Connerly, Boston College edge Donovan Izaraku, Georgia safety Malachi Starks. Tier 2, day 2 trade down, think the 40 to 50 range, as John put it. Ole Miss cornerback Trey Amos, Kentucky cornerback Maxwell Hairston, a big fan of him. Ohio State offensive lineman Donovan Jackson, South Carolina DT TJ Sanders, Texas A&M edge Nick Scorton. And then tier 3, day 2, number 64, or a targeted trade up. NC State offensive tackle Anthony Belton, another version of a Mekhi Becton, Anthony Belton. William & Mary tackle Charles Grant, UCLA edge Femi Oladejo, Ohio State defensive tackle Tyleik Williams, which is a very interesting name. If his name is called, start thinking about Jordan Davis. We'll talk about that. Tier 4, number 96, or a trade up in round 4. You got Dylan Fairchild, the Georgia offensive lineman, West Virginia offensive lineman Wyatt Millum, Purdue offensive lineman Marcus Mbow, Kansas State corner Jacob Parrish, Jalen Reed, the safety from Penn State, Elijah Roberts, the edge from SMU, Texas A&M's defensive tackle Shamar Turner. Those are there for Tier 4. And then finally, Tier 5, those Day 3 guys. Syracuse running back LaKent Allen, interesting guy, Millville, New Jersey guy. Miami edge Tyler Barron, Texas running back Jaden Blue, Penn State linebacker Kobe King, South Carolina cornerback Jalen Smith, Iowa State tackle Jalen Travis, and finally, Minnesota quarterback Justin Wally. So there's your list of tiers. You guys should be ready to go. All right. So depending on where we are in the draft, these are the names. You can write them down. You can go to John's SI.com article, the tier ranking 3.0, I believe it's titled. I'll read the title, Eagles Top 30 Visit Tiers 3.0, and you can follow along. So when you're watching the draft, you know exactly what names to keep your eye on that will be there or not there. So keep your eye on that. We appreciate everybody being here today. Johnny Mac, when we get back, we'll talk about some good stuff with the draft. I want to talk about Coop. I want to talk about Jordan, Goddard, some rumors about Dallas Goedert. Another rumor that sounds crazy to me, but I'll bring it up to you and see what you think of it. And the other interesting part about this draft is, boy, there's a lot of players on this top 30 visits that we just broke down that if they are drafted, it changes some things on your defense. And what I mean is if you draft Malachi, Sidney Brown, changes. If you draft Tyleek Williams, like John said, what's that mean for Jordan Davis? So we'll talk about some of those changes as well. Jacob Parrish, what's it mean for Cooper DeJean in the slot? So we'll talk about all that. Appreciate all you guys being here. Stay tuned, everybody, on Birds 365. We'll be right back.
The following is a real testimonial from the father of a young injured victim.
I didn't think she was going to make it.
Major Perry's daughter was the victim of a horrific accident caused by someone else's negligence.
If you don't find the right counselor, law firm that you're looking for, you will get lost in the wilderness.
Badly injured? Call the Fritz and Bianculli Law Firm at 215-458-22